Episode number 41 of Making a Case. Should education be a personal or social responsibility? Let's get it. All right, welcome back to another episode of Making the Case. I am your host, yours truly, Dr. Jacob Isom, educator, author, speaker, entrepreneur, content creator, a little bit of everything. Um, so we got another great episode for you today. Um, is education a personal or social responsibility? Now, before I get into my opening statement, you already know, for those of you that's been rocking with me, I have two channel norms. One, I take points and not people. And two, I don't do all that cussing and derogatory stuff. We'll leave that for other people to do. Um, and what I will say is this. So let's get into my opening statement, right? Um, what I'm about to say is tied to today's topic, so I don't want you to think that I'm just going on a rant, which I know I'm quite possibly I will do, right? But what I want to say about education being a personal or social responsibility. Now, let me just get this out the way, right? It may seem like I'm kind of trying to play the middle ground. Let me make this statement and then I'll elaborate on what I actually am going to be making the case on today. Um, so the quick answer is educational, personal, social responsibility, both, right? So that's the quick answer. Now, of course, we got to make one or the other, or at least I will attempt to do that. But if I had a choice between the two, I would say that it is a personal responsibility. And the pieces of evidence are going to kind of talk about why it is a personal evidence. We'll get to that here in a moment. But what this past election, and I don't want to harp because I've already done a video on the election. So I don't want to harp too much on it, but I will say this. This past election showed so-called black people, American, Africans, African Americans, whatever you want to call yourself, it exposed us. It exposed us for our lack of education. It exposed us for our over emotional, which typically we are pretty emotional, particularly when it comes to race, right? Because of our racial history. Um, and it showed us that we will rather vote based on personality than based on policies, which goes back to education. The mass majority of us, and really this has nothing to do with race, right? Are not educated enough in order to really make an informed decision on who we really want to represent us. And that just doesn't go for the presidency, that goes for congressmen, it goes for your mayor, your governor, everything, right? We're not taking the time to research, put in the work to really be informed about these people we're voting for. Most people are literally just voting blue and red because of how their parents vote or just because of how they've been brainwashed and taught, right? So a lot of time what you're seeing is like true education is being replaced by programming. It's being replaced by whether or not we like somebody or not. That's not education. Okay. It exposed us for going back to the very thing that we always claim that America need to get better at. We always use that with our victimhood, which is race. And that's just the truth of it, right? So is education a personal or social responsibility? It's very much a personal responsibility because now Can your kids start preschool at 3, 4? Yes, right? So, but even before that point, everybody understands that it is a responsibility of the parent to get that child ready for some type of organization, some type of schooling. We all understand this, right? As a parent, you should always be your child's teacher. Always. Now, whether you want to say that's a mentor, whether you want to say that you're guiding your kids, whatever way you want to put it or look at it, you should always be your child's teacher. Always. And so a lot of time what we do as parents, we drop the ball. And we don't want to talk about it publicly. We don't want to blame parents for the reason why their kids are struggling in school. We don't want to blame parents for the reason why their kids are struggling in the first place. We don't want to blame parents for the reason why they got the physical ailments, the reason why they behind in literacy, the reason why they behind in social skills. We do not want to put that onus on parents. We want to put it on the education system. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm speaking to you as an educator, but also as a parent. Right? Because I got experience with both. So, is education a personal social responsibility? First, it's a personal responsibility. Because even though we're sending our children to school to get educated by other adults, we're supposed to send them with a certain amount, with a baseline, with a foundation of knowledge. Then they can build on from that. But a lot of time we too busy in the socialization realm as far as just making sure our kids are fed, clothed, and are having fun, that we kind of forget that as parents, top 3, if not number 1, responsibility to our kids is to be their teacher. Okay? So what we're going to do is I got 3 pieces of evidence that's kind of going to make that case of why it's a personal responsibility. And we're going to look at some other things. But without further ado, hey, let's get into our first piece of evidence, shall we? All right. So for my first piece of evidence, we're just getting right into it, right? Why, or I should say, is education a personal or social responsibility? Well, I have an article saying that parents are responsible for the education and upbringing of their children, right? So we're just going to get straight into it. And this is from a platform, actually from the Mississippi Center for Public Policy. Okay, so this comes out of Mississippi. Now, I'm laughing for a reason. I don't even know if I want to tell you why I'm laughing, right? Some of you may be thinking, Mississippi? They all backwards, slow, but no disrespect for people that's watching from Mississippi. We love you, okay? But we know Mississippi don't have the greatest history when it comes to a lot of things, all right? So that's neither here nor there, okay? So I love you, Mississippi, okay? Hopefully you'll hire me to come speak at your school, okay? In your businesses. JacobIsom.com, RCDconsultancy.com. Check me out. All right. Now, so let's get into the article and read what they have to say. So parents, not government, are responsible for the education and upbringing of their children, which I happen to agree with. All right. So it said principle number 10, parents, not government, are responsible for the education and upbringing of their children. It is the duty of parents to maintain their children decently, to protect them according to the dictates of prudence, and to educate them according to the suggestions of a judicious and zealous regard for their usefulness, their respectability, and happiness. And that's James Wilson, Lectures on Law, 1791. So that was written back in 1791. In a broad sense, we must be careful not to use school or education interchangeably, which I actually agree. School is merely one source of education. True education is the development of a person's soul and involves spiritual, emotional, and intellectual exercise. And I would just say that school and education, well, in the school, you have a curriculum, you have structure, right? Education is not as scripted and it's not as structured. Um, Here to my left, I have a whole rack of books, right? But I don't have a structure to when I'm reading them books, what books I'm reading, and things of that nature, right? It just happens. So education can come in many different platforms and many different outlets, right? So education is just you getting immersed in knowledge, and that can come in different forms, like I said, and different subjects, etc. Right? So we got to understand that, which is the reason why I typically like to call myself an educator and not a teacher. Now, I teach now. Now your boy teach, okay? But I'm an educator, being that I'm a disseminator of information. All right. A teacher and an educator are two different things. Preach. All right, let's get into it. This is why parents are ultimately responsible for ensuring the proper education and upbringing of their children. This means that no matter who else is involved, including school teachers, coaches, church teachers, or other adults, parents are to be the architects of their children's preparation for adulthood. Absolutely. Whether or not parents act on that responsibility, the fact is that they are accountable to the Creator for their children that have been entrusted to them. Okay? Our children are our responsibility, which means what education they get is our responsibility. And it just doesn't just stop at picking a school, whether you're doing public or private or charter or Montessori, right? It don't just stop there. It's that when they're outside, okay, how are you actually training and teaching your kids on what topics are they learning about? When it comes to the holidays, do they know why you celebrate them holidays? When it comes to things that are being done in the house, do they know why they need to do it, the importance of it? All of that is education. All right. Over the past few decades, we have witnessed a retreat on the part of more and more parents who think they have better things to do than raise their children, or who think they are unfit for the task. Feeling unfit is a universal sentiment. All parents need advice to help raising children, but this doesn't mean they are unfit. This retreat of parents has invited the pursuit of others who claim to know better than parents how to meet the needs of children. Many government programs have been conceived to accommodate this retreat. In the process, parents have yielded even more of their responsibility and reason that the intellectual and even emotional stimulation provided by these paid workers exceeds the parents' own capacity to provide such things. In some cases, this may be true, but the answer is to expand the parents' abilities and confidence, not to encourage them to relinquish more responsibility. This is an area where churches are urgently needed to fill the gap, both in teaching parents and in providing child care where there's a true need. And I agree. I think the churches can get more involved, but I think the schools can do a better job at getting parents involved, having classes for parents. For those schools that have a huge Hispanic population, Arabic population, or what have you, like having language classes and things of that nature. So the school can do a better job at reaching out to the community, and parents can do a better job of being more involved. All right. It literally takes a village. And I know you done heard that over and over, but it's so true. I always say it's, and I say this about a lot of things, it's the Holy Trinity. And I ain't meaning that no disrespect. It's teacher, it's parent, it's child, right? All three have to work in concordance. All three have to do work. If all three are doing their job, child is successful. Okay? Now, I would like to say it's that simple, but that is the foundation. And unfortunately, a lot of kids are not starting out with that foundation. Oh, let's see. Where are we at? All too often, what happens next is the blame game. When parents expect the schools to take responsibility for raising their children, they blame the schools when their expectation goes unmet. Yet it is impossible for schools to fulfill this expectation. They try to by hiring more people and doing more research to find a way to replace parents, but the problem remains. Thus, they blame the parents. Our society has brought into this notion that schools are the key ingredient in children's lives. The term parental involvement has come out of this. The implication that schools are responsible for children and parents are supposed to be involved in helping schools do their job. In reality, the opposite is true. Parents are responsible and schools are merely supposed to help. I agree. School involvement will be a more appropriate term if we view the roles as they should be. The fact is, parents cannot give away portions of their responsibility. They can abdicate it totally, yielding all rights and responsibility to adopt a parent, but ultimate responsibility for one's children is indivisible. It cannot be shared with others. So the responsibility is a parent. And what we often did is it's school responsibility and then the parent's supposed to help. No, it should be reversed. So I totally agree. Let's see. Yeah, let's talk about this. When parents exercise their responsibility to orchestrate their children's education, some choose to educate their children at home, but most parents hire professional educators. They might hire private tutors, but usually they hire public or private schools. In either case, these educators should assist with the child's education, and the parents should have the ability to choose a school that will accomplish that purpose without undermining their authority. And if parents see that their children are not learning well, they should be able to choose a different school, which for the most part happens, right? For parents who have enough money, this option already exists. If they are unhappy with the public school to which their child has been assigned, they can send their child to a private school, or they can move to a school district or attendance zone that will serve their children better. But parents who don't have enough money are often stuck with the school to which the government has assigned them regardless of the quality of the school. Even under federal guidelines that require perennial poor schools to offer parents an option to transfer their child to another school within the district, it is not uncommon for the other schools to be just as poor as the ones the children will be leaving. And there's a lot of truth to that, and that's the reason why with a lot of states you're seeing school vouchers, right, where parents are not being given the option to choose schools outside of their school district, right? That's why that is becoming more common. Charter schools are becoming more common and it's popping up. So the choice of education is becoming more popular. But even with that, I think we're still missing a boat because at the end of the day, we need parents to take their role seriously as educator. Okay, that is the number one thing that we need to get into parents' mind, and hopefully this episode can help spark that dialogue and that conversation that need to be had. Because here on Making the Case, we're not afraid to have tough conversations, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. Let's see. Yeah, that's all that I really want to talk about. That as far as the responsibility is up, it is on the parent, right? The school is supposed to help. Now, I always think that providing parents with options to what school they want their kids to go to is a great thing, right? But it's not going to matter what school they go through if you're not investing in your child and being the number one source of where they go to, because a lot of people will frown upon sex education, right? Which used to be taught in the schools. But if you're not teaching your kid about sex, where are they supposed to learn it? So I think that's a perfect example of why the parent is the first option when it comes to education. All right. So let's get into our second piece of evidence to further the point of why parents should be the sole party that's responsible for your child's education. All right. All right. So for my second piece of evidence, we're going to kind of look at it from a couple different layers, right? Yes, I believe that schooling or education, I really should say education, is parents' responsibility mainly with the school assistant. But there's other different factors that go into that. So it's not just parents, it's not just school, but there's other factors. So That's what this, and this is not like an article. This is more like kind of like a pamphlet that is providing information by a group out of St. Louis called Focus St. Louis. Um, and so this called By the People, America in the World. So it addresses different layers that I kind of want to read to you, because I actually definitely agree with kind of the different layers that goes into making sure that we all are involved when it comes to educating children, although the parent is the sole responsibility. So let's get into this. Who is accountable for children's education? A century ago, there was no doubt as to who was responsible for the education of children in our society: their parents. With the establishment of mandatory public education, responsibility has shifted into the public sector and become a national, state, and local issue. In 2002, President Bush signed into law the No Child Left Behind Act, holding schools accountable for educating children to mandate standards, leaving no child behind. So, whom do we hold accountable for the education of children? The teachers, the schools, the parents, the community? How do we as a region hold each of these systems accountable for providing quality education to the new next generation? So all these different factors that they mentioned, the community, parents, schools, and teachers, all of them do play a factor. I just think is a hierarchy and parents are at the top, right? And we could debate what comes next after that, but parents should be at the top of that. Okay. Because at the end of the day, you are responsible for that child. We can't accept the responsibility when it comes to food, clothing, and shelter and leave out education if it's not, as if it's not important, as important, if not more important. All right. So let's get into it. They start with school accountability, right? Some say government should take the lead in holding schools accountable for student education success. Well-defined standards and testing like those in the recent No Child Left Behind legislation are the best way to create and teach a quality curriculum. Supporters of this approach think schools work best when teachers and students know what is expected of them, and society has a way to measure how well those expectations are being met. Schools that lag behind have clear goals for improvement, and when goals are not met, there are consequences. Critics of this approach think it makes schools focus too much on teaching to the test. As a result, schools may drop or de-emphasize subjects that aren't on the test, like art, music, foreign language, and creative writing. They also say some local control is sacrificed to state and national government. Some critics believe that government can offer suggestions or guidelines, but should not tell local communities how to run their schools. Others believe that local communities, including parents and school officials, should decide on their own what is best to teach and whether and how to test their local student body. One thing I will say is, because the reason why we're going all the way back to 2002, which is 22 years ago, is that a lot of the remnants and effects of the No Child Left Behind is still in place to this day in a lot of states. All right. So the whole idea of testing, right, and holding schools accountable, well, that's still in place in a lot of states. Right. And the whole idea, for those of you that are not in education, the whole idea of teaching to the test, what a lot of schools do is to make sure that what we generally call backwards planning, where we have the information up front of what we're going to have on the test, literally have the test built, and then literally we'll teach our kids what's on that test, right? With some people, you have different opinions on it. Some people feel like it's unethical. Some people feel like it just makes sense, you know. I'm kind of I think it's very scripted and very robotic. I like to focus on skills more than standards. So that's kind of where I sit on that. But no, schools have their responsibility. Testing and assessments is just part of education. That is not going anywhere. So schools are always going to be held to that standard and that accountability when it comes to testing, right? So we'll leave that up to schools. So let's move on. I do want to read what No Child Left Behind Act essentially says, right? Signed into law in 2002, the No Child Left Behind Act is viewed as the most sweeping federal education bill in more than 40 years. The law is based on four main principles. States must develop their own academic achievement standards and benchmark to which the federal government will hold them accountable. A number of tests are already or will soon be federally required, including ones for reading, math, science at various points in grades 3 through 12. Two, failing school are designated as such, and parents may transfer a student out of a low achieving or unsafe school to another public school. Three, states can transfer federal dollars between different grant programs to improve school progress. Four, education programs must be based on No Child Left Behind sanctioned, scientifically based research, which a lot of times we're looking at a lot of that research based on how do we deal with diverse kids, whether that's language, whether that's kids with IEPs and things of that nature. So those are the 4 points, right? So and like I said, a lot of schools still, or I should say, a lot of states still kind of go with the No Child Left Behind. Even though I know when Obama was in office, he did Race to the Top, which isn't as popular, right? As No Child Left Behind still is 22 years later. Uh, Teacher accountability. There's always teacher accountability. I want to get more to family involvement and community involvement, right? Research has shown time and time again that family involvement in a child education leads to increased test scores, higher graduation rates, and more opportunities for higher education. How can the schools and the parents work together to form a partnership aimed at providing the best education for the individual child? This is especially a concern for homes with single parents, when parents are employed in second or third shifts, work several jobs, or when parents are immigrants and not accustomed to the American public school system. Many challenges exist in keeping parents involved in their child education. Uh, in recent years, parent and family involvement has been a top concern for education. School districts are beginning to look at ways in which they may be able to encourage parental and family involvement in a child education. Many now view it as the school's responsibility to work with parents and make them an integral part of the schools. Couple things. Single parent household, that is a huge issue because it's hard to get that single parent in when they're working so much, right? So that's something that each school district and community are gonna have to kind of work with parents on that regard, whether it's providing child care, whether it's providing financial assistance or what have you. That's designated for each school district. And the second thing I want to address is the fact that I know with private schools, uh, they can do this more so than public school is, requiring parental involvement, requiring that a parent shows up a certain time a month to their child's school, or they be involved in certain programs and things like that. Like I said, private schools can get away with it. It'll be more difficult public schools, but I think that the more involvement and the more communication you give to parents and why this, and show them the stats or how parental involvement is so important, I think it will go a long way. So let me get to the last one, which is community role. Um, in demanding higher school performance and student achievement, changes are almost always aimed at what the school could do differently and how parents may play a stronger role in boosting student achievement. However, we often fail to see that schools are part of a larger community and that the community plays a role in the form of education of children. The resources a school has to offer its children are based upon the community in which it is located. Property values and taxes increase school funding, community organization provides support services, and every citizen within the community is responsible for voting on issues related to the school system. It is easy to see that community members and the community as a whole have a larger impact on the functioning of the school. So that is something that some people know, but some people don't know. Schools are based on property taxes, right? Um, Teachers are paid by taxes, right? So when schools are doing well, I think the community benefits and vice versa. Okay. So the number one emphasis in the community should be the schools. The schools should be the foundation, right? Because that's the center of information and learning. So we should be encouraging and pushing people towards schools and schooling because we understand that when people have information, they do great things. They're creators. There's inventors, right? They're the one to provide the infrastructure. So we should be pushing people in that direction. And as a community, that is what we should be working towards. Okay. So it's a circular thing, right? We got the community, we got the parents, we got the schools, we got the teachers. So that's kind of what this pamphlet, you could say article, is kind of breaking down, right? How it takes a village, and we've all heard it before. So we all, share a slice of the pie of accountability for children education. But at the end of the day, our individual children, they're our responsibility. So we got to make sure that we step up and do what we got to do. Yes, we have to work and provide for our children, but at the same time, sacrifice is needed in order to make sure they get what they get. Because what we want to do is we want to create productive citizens in our society. That's what we want to do. That should be the goal. All right. We should want to make sure that our kids have a way better life than we have. And part of that is being educated. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody got to go to college, but it means that everybody should be educated. Because part of the reason why we argue the way we do is so many people that's uneducated and misinformed that we can't talk about the facts because we don't care about the facts. All right. So let's go to our last piece of evidence and kind of wrap this on up. All right. So for my last piece of evidence, we kind of just going back to the argument of who has a responsibility more so, personal or social. And so this is from a platform called Kids Hope USA. And it's titled School versus Home. Who's responsible? So let's get into it, see what we agree with, see if it helps our argument, stuff like that. Like that. All right. Parents in school have the same goal to help children grow, mature, and become citizens who contribute positively to our society. Each group expects much of the other. Parents expect schools to protect their children and teach them effectively. Schools expect parents to prepare their children for school and encourage the development of character. Our society may be giving schools increasingly more responsibility for raising children. Parents may be expecting too much of school with you take them attitude. School may experience more and more frustration that parents do not do enough, but schools do have a responsibility to guide children, encourage, and involve parents. Now, of course, I've been making it clear throughout this episode that I believe parents should have their responsibility, okay? The main share of the responsibility. Of course, schools have a job to do, but at the end of the day, parents have to do a better job of preparing their kids for school, or checking up their kids on school, checking their progress and things of that nature. Each group must have an understanding of the other. School must understand that parents may be trying their best to rear their children and that they usually want the best for their children. Parents must understand that there are many demands on the children's school and that educating students is a complex process with many variables. And both of those are very true. There's kind of a saying in education that goes a little something like this. Parents are only sending the best of what they have, which is true, right? But at the same time, we got to make sure that we're really standing on business, right? When it comes to making sure kids understanding the purpose, the why, and the relevancy, really, of their education. And that last one is the big part, right? How is this relevant to my life? How can I apply this? How can I use that? Because a lot of times we don't do that enough. And I will say that's more so on the school, right? But parents as well, but that's more so on the school. So it said taking action. Parents of school must share the responsibility and cooperate to ensure the social, emotional, and intellectual growth of children. Parents, model appropriate behavior, be involved in your child's learning, meet your child's teachers, avoid being defensive about feedback about your child. Do not rescue your child, be involved in your school before a problem occurs rather than only after there's a problem. And that last one is definitely a huge one. Schools, communicate with parents, provide parenting tips for encouraging school success to parents, include parents in building the learning community, avoid using educational jargon, and provide clear and practical way parents can support learning, teach respect, and respond to bullying and inappropriate behaviors. And I will say both of those lists look pretty good to me because one thing that I'm a believer in is roles, right? The school has a role, the teacher has a role, the child has a role, parents have a role, the community has a role, the government has a role, whether that's a state, local, or federal level, right? So I don't think this really took a side on whether it's the parents' responsibility more so than the school. But I think it was kind of outlining that, hey, both are important, both have jobs and roles to do. And if both people are doing those roles, then, hey, the child will be successful. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into my closing statement. All right. So I know this wasn't the sexiest topic, right? But I think by far it's probably the most important topic. And of course, I'm biased as a person who has dedicated much of his life to either gaining knowledge and education or actually being an educator, right? So I understand that I have a different lens and a viewpoint than most people do, but that is kind of part of the issue, right? That we kind of don't see the importance of education, but I think it comes back to rear its ugly head when it comes to having political discussion, when it comes to having racial discussion, when it comes to having discussions on history, science, or what have you. All that is based on information gathering. All that is based on data, facts, and statistics, right? And somebody has to have taught you. You have to be getting your education from somewhere, right? Not just social media. So a lot of time the issue that we see going on in our society is the fact that we're underinformed or misinformed. And we don't have the will and we don't have the motivation to cross check, cross reference the information that we get on a day-to-day basis. Okay. It's very clickbaitish. Okay. It's very programming. None of these are words, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying. All right. So um I think that we really have a huge issue when it comes to educating our young. When it comes to understanding the importance of why their informal years, which is previous to 5, are so important. When it comes to once they do get into those elementary years, how they set the foundation, right? Because if your kid leave elementary school and not reading on grade level, that is going to set the foundation for them struggling through middle and high school years, right? So it is up to us as parents for us to be that motivational factor and that motivational piece. Yes, intrinsic motivation is just that. It has to come from inside that person, right? But we can utilize extrinsic motivation or extrinsic factors, but we have to provide that relevancy. We have to provide that spark in children to let them know why things are so important and this is how you should go about things. So if we could program people religiously, if we can program people politically, if we can program people socially, why can't we program people educationally? And it sounds very sad or bad, or however you want to look at it, but we have to stop, or we have to start getting on the train of, hey, let's get more informed about topics. Let's get more informed about our history. Okay. So there you have it, man. We're going to end the episode on that. Hopefully you took some from it. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that, because we're trying to get to the point where we can go live and bring guests on and things of that nature. So please, let's get our subscribers up. We'll leave the link for books and merch. And if you want a consultant, we'll leave that link as well. Cash App, all that good stuff. Okay. Social media handles, you already know what it is. Okay. Of course, I am you, you are me. Love, always love, eternal. Remember, the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. And I believe that we have made that case, baby. All right. Hey, peace. One love.